Greetings, fellow Hyperboreans. Dave here, the developer of the Hyperborea system for Foundry VTT. It's been a while since I've done a video, and I've had a number of releases and some nice enhancements, as well as bug fixes over the last couple of months, few months since I did my last video, so I thought it might be worthwhile to just kind of do an informal review here of some of the newest features that I've added over the last couple of months. I'm mostly going to focus on the most recent release, which is coming out today, 11th of March 2025, and it's release number 1.1.11. And I got a number of interesting things there, but I will also point out a few of the older stuff that's maybe been around for a few weeks or even a couple of months as we run into it. But to begin then, starting with the release that's out today, I've actually got 5 issues, an issue being basically a to-do item in GitHub that we're closing out and releasing today. And I'm going to start with the 2 bug fixes, and then we'll go on to the 3 enhancements after that. And like I said, I'll probably tackle some other items along the way as well here. So you can see I've got my kind of standard demo combat setup here, and I've got the combat tracker, right here, and then that way I can have the chat box to the right, so I can keep an eye on both bits here while I'm playing. This is actually how I usually GM a game as well, so I can watch the chat with my players as well as keep the combat tracker open here. Unfortunately, I'm traveling right now, so I don't have a second monitor, so I have to have it all fit on one laptop screen, which is what I've got here. So number one thing to point out, and this is an old release, this goes all the way back to December, of course, is that we've got group-based combat tracking and group-based initiative. So if you haven't kept up to date with the system, this has been out for a few months now, and I already created the groups. So if I can actually wipe this out really quick and create it. So let's go ahead and do that, and then all I'm going to do is I'm going to do a Command A or Control A in Windows to select all the tokens on the map, and then I can just right-click one and hit this toggle combat state. That's just standard Foundry feature. That's not anything special, but then you can see it created them in groups. The way the system does groups, the way I wrote the code, is that it actually looks at the token disposition. So a token disposition of, I forget if it's aggressive or what it is, but if we look at the token here, we'll just take a quick look. Oh, hostile, of course. So it's these options here, neutral, friendly, and hostile. I actually ignore secret, okay? But of the 3, neutral, friendly, and hostile, the system will actually group hostile things in red. I apparently have this skeleton guy set up as neutral. Yep, and all the player characters were set up as neutral, so that's why he's there. So I'm going to fix that. So I'm just going to click the flag here to set the combatant groups. You can see we've got these set up here. And all I need to do is find Mr. Skeleton and tap red to jump him into that group. He left blue and jumped into red. And it's that simple. Now they're in the right groups the way I want them, as you can see. So as part of the combat tracker, I built in action declaration to be done before you roll initiative. Let's see, the skeleton, I'm going to say he's going to cast a spell. And then the 2 moon specters are both going to move and melee, and it doesn't matter what order I do the melee and move option. So the system allows you to combine actions with movement, but if you just do, like if I do magic here, if I change it to melee, you see it turned off magic. So these ones are exclusive of each other. Melee, missile, and magic are exclusive of each other, but you can combine any of the 3 with movement. So actually the second bug that was fixed is actually one where it had an error here where the system would take a move plus an action, like the moon specters here, and it would actually put them ahead in the initiative order of someone who is doing a pure move. So if let's just play with this. I'm going to make him just a pure move. So that way you can see that it works correctly now because it is fixed. So let's see, for Carrick, I'm going to say he's going to do a spell because he's a warlock. Alaric is going to do missile, and Niella, I think, is probably also going to do a spell. So we've got the actions set up here. Oh, I'm going to hit begin combat, and then we hit the roll or re-roll button here to roll our initiative. You want to do this after you've declared actions, because the actions, of course, are going to determine or affect where people fall within their own group. So you can see it rolled a group for blue and a group for red, and you can see I rolled 6. So the party 1 initiative. It's just just one thing. The GM has to use this button, by the way. Players doesn't appear for players. So the GM rolls the initiative for everybody, and you can see now that the missile here is going to be ahead of magic, as you would normally expect. By the way, so the pure number 6 and 4, that's what appears at the group level. At the individual level, you see these decimals. This is actually, I believe it's disabled by default, so I have enabled it. But you can see that move now falls ahead of move plus melee, as you would expect, even though they had exactly the same, obviously the same die roll because they're in the same group, but they have the same dex as well. So you can see pure move 4.209. Anyway, suffice to say, that bug is fixed. So that was one of the bugs that was fixed with this release. The other bug that's fixed, and I can't demo it right now, is that someone had actually set up a brand new world and system, and they hadn't even created any scenes yet. So, scenes are these things that are right here. And like I've got this Crypt of Dalvernar, that's the scene that we're looking at. But if you don't have any scenes here, which, by default you create a new world, there's no scenes. But what the person did was they created an actor and some items, weapons, and then tried to test an attack roll, and it was failing because they didn't have the tokens on a scene. And so I fixed that. So now, even without a scene, you can actually create some actors, make some attacks. It's not going to target a token because, of course, there's no tokens. But you can at least roll an attack and see what the results are, and it works. So that's the other bug that was fixed. So those are the 2 bugs that are fixed in this release. The one edge case, and then the group-based initiative, which actually could be kind of important, at least I think. Some people, maybe they don't care as much quite about initiative order, but if you noticed it and it was probably irritating to you because it was wrong, well, now it's fixed. Okay, so now we've got the 3 new enhancements that we're rolling out today. And these ones are actually pretty exciting, and that's what I was more excited about to get into with this. So let's see. The first issue, that is to say, or a to-do item that we're adding is we've actually added a use button to the chat for items that are tagged as consumable. And actually, it's more than consumable. I started with just consumable, and then I added it to other things. So what am I talking about? What I'm talking about, this is not necessarily in combat, but let's see, what does Niella have in her items that are consumables? She has, let's say she's got a torch. So, you can normally manage your torch inventory just right here. I hit minus to say I've used a torch. I can hit plus to replenish that inventory. So the feature that we've added was if I hit the eyeball icon, you can see it pops the torch description over here, and I can use the item. And when I tap that, first it says Niella used torch, and secondly, you can see over here, her inventory did decrease by 1, and I can just re-add that back in, no big deal. So now you ask, well, what use is that when you can just manage it from your character sheet? It's a very valid question, but what that leads into is the next enhancement that I've added. So this was just kind of trivially done on the way to adding this big enhancement, which is the effects on actors, whether they're coming from items or effects directly on themselves or whatever they happen to be. I've done a bunch of enhancements for this. So if you don't know, the base Foundry, the core Foundry system has a pretty rudimentary effects framework. There's not a lot of functionality there. I think that's by design. I think what the intent of the Foundry developers was to actually just provide a framework for system developers to do something, to use. And so I am taking advantage of the framework they've provided, and I'm extending that quite a bit with this release. And actually, I may even add some more stuff, but for now, I've got a good start, and I thought, okay, this is actually good enough for an initial release for people to start taking advantage of. Now, you may recall, those of you who've been around for a bit, or if you're new, you won't know this, but I did, in fact, improve some of the effects capabilities. It was a month or so ago. The effects tab was always here on the character sheet, but there was not an effects tab on item sheets. So as an example, if I have, let's see, give me something that would be useful. Oh, the Ring of Invisibility, of course. So items, when I released version 1.0.0 way back, in 2024, I think it was right around last week of October or middle of October, somewhere around, there was no effects tab here. So this was added, I want to say early December I added this tab so that people could actually add effects like this invisibility effect. And from there, if you add this, you can actually, so I don't have it on right now, but if you have this transfer effect to actor checked, what that will do is when an actor takes ownership of an item, basically dragging and dropping onto the character sheet so it's in their inventory, the effect here will be added to the actor immediately. And it might be a temporary effect, or it might be a passive effect, depending on what you've got, but it would be added the same way to the character sheet, either temporary or passive, or even inactive if it's an inactive one. Okay, so what I've got here is, you can see it's not inactive. That's what this suspended thing would be. Also, you could look at it here, and it's not under the inactive down here, so either way. But also, since I don't have this box checked, it does not apply to the actor right away. But what I can do, and let's just close out of. So we've got the invisibility. What does that do? It basically turns on this invisible status condition on the token. Okay, that's all it does. I don't actually have any effects over here where you could do whatever you were going to do. But for now, for an example, I've got invisible set. So what this does, first of all, one thing to be aware of. When you set a status condition, that automatically forces the effect to be a temporary one. So that's why it's showing up under temporary right here. If you're creating your own items and you want a passive effect, passive meaning always on, like if you've got, I'm just going to make something up here, but let's say you've actually got boots of speed and you wanted an effect that would be like set their movement to 50 at all times, and you want that to be always on, you got to make sure you do not set a status condition here. I don't know if there's a hasted condition here or not, but you would want to make sure you don't set it, because otherwise it'll become listed as temporary. And in this system, it matters because of this enhancement that I'm releasing today, because my system actually looks at whether an effect is temporary or passive, which is permanent, when you're in combat, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So for now, we've got this invisibility thing, and here's what I want to show you, because this is part of the other thing that was released. So as I mentioned, since that's a temporary effect and it's not applied to the actor, it's not here. How do I apply it to the actor then? I'll show you. I'm going to go back to items. I'm going to click the eyeball. It's going to pop over here in the chat. Oh, there we go. Finally. Yeah, I think I've got a little lag on the internet. Anyways, now you can see I've got two things because I'm logged in as GM. These are both part of the new release. So use item is for players only, and you click it and it applies the effect. Also, it will reduce the inventory if it's a consumable item. But you can see a ring of invisibility is not consumable, but I can still use the item and it'll apply the effect of that item to my character. So I'm going to click that, and there we go. Niela used it, and you can see applying effect invisibility. That's the name of the effect that was listed in there. So if we go back in here quickly, you see it's called invisibility right there under the effects. So, and you can see it's temporary. So now, if I go to Niela, waha, we've got invisibility added there. Also, you can see now her token has gotten kind of this funky cyan color and a little bit translucent, and that is the invisibility status effect that's been added to the token. And it's temporary. You can see, first of all, its source came from the ring. Secondly, you can see the duration. I built that into the effect, by the way, so I probably should have showed that before. Oops, duration. You want to set duration, and in general, I think it's best, unless you really want to fiddle with the timing, it's best just to have rounds and turns and have them be the same number. Now here's the thing to be aware of. Turns in the context of effects, this is the actor's turn. We're not talking a 10-minute game term in Hyperborea sense, because remember, Foundry is written for Foundry. It's not written for Hyperborea. So in Foundry, a round is a full combat round that includes all of the actors and the actions that they took in that round. A turn is a single combatant taking their actions within the context of a round. So what you do is you set these to the same, and all that really does is it makes sure that when it's counting down, because what happens is as you go through combat and you go through rounds, internally it starts counting down from 5, 4, 3 down to 0. If your battle goes for 5 or 6 rounds, you will actually see invisibility disappear from the token because it ran out of time. Now, of course, the real invisibility spell lasts a lot longer than 5 rounds, but this was just for an example. So we've got this set, okay? You can see it's on there, and in order to show you how it changes, I'm actually just going to quickly zip through a bunch of rounds here just to demonstrate this. So I'm just tapping through next turn, next turn, next turn, as you can see. And if you're watching over here, you can see that this thing flipped to 4 rounds and 3 turns. Now this is just a display it's just a calculated field that Foundry is doing. Honestly, I think there's a bug in this display because these numbers jump around a little bit, and I think it's a little bit weird. Maybe somebody else will see this and they'll say, oh no, the logic works like this and it works perfectly and it makes sense. I could not make sense of it. So, but I sort of ignore it. But the point is, as we go through this, you can see it's, it's counting down. Now it's on 3 rounds and then, counting down still. And eventually, I should say, we're going to get down to, come on, we'll get none. Okay, so it's got to go one more full turn here, and then there it goes. So you can see it went inactive. So here, invisibility just turned off, and if I get her out of the way, you can see that that effect is gone. She's no longer cyan translucent, so it's temporarily removed. And then in the next round, the system actually is going to delete this, which I'm going to go ahead and do. So you'll see that happen as well. There it went. It just disappeared. So that's how temporary effects work. And they only work in the context of combat because this is where you've got the timer counting down. If you've got a temporary effect with a duration and everything on there, but you're not actually in a combat with a countdown, nothing will happen. The system won't care. It'll leave that temporary effect on there until you get to the next combat, and then it's going to start counting down from whatever number it happens to be at. So, but I should also mention that let's re-add this. I'm going to reuse it just to add it to her. So now it's on there, but let's say we end the combat, and in the combat, and even before I clicked yes, it automatically removes all temporary effects from all tokens, or all actors. Actors being both PCs and NPCs monsters. So that's another part of this same feature, is that temporary effects are automatically removed because, again, they're temporary. You're assuming this is an effect that lasts like 5 rounds, 1 round, 1 minute, something like that. And at the end of the battle, you might have 30 seconds left of whatever spell you're using, you have on you, or whatever effect, but you're probably not too worried about maintaining that temporary effect on your token on the map. So I automatically remove it just to do some cleanup. Let's see, anything else on the enhanced items? So we talked about use. The other thing is the apply. I was going to talk about that. So what that allows, this is for GMs only, and it allows you to apply an effect to someone else's token. So, the player of Niella, by default, does not have the permissions to apply effects to other actors or tokens. She can't apply them to other players. She can't apply them to monsters. So this apply invisibility button only appears for GMs. Since I'm logged in as GM, of course, I can see it. And it, of course, can only work for GMs because I'm the only one as a GM or an assistant GM who would have the permissions to do this. But essentially what I can do is, we'll pretend we're casting an invisibility spell. And the same thing would happen for an invisibility spell. I would have this apply invisibility, and I could just tap on Carrick. And remember, this is coming from Niella, so we're assuming that Niella cast a spell, and I can now apply it. And now you can see Carrick has gone invisible. So as a GM, I can do that. Now I'll go ahead and remove that very quickly here. And that's that. We're good there. The other thing is, if I have, say, let's see, I think I had a spell here that might have an effect. Yes, I have Burning Hands. I'm pretty sure I had set an effect on that one. Yeah, I've got Burning. So here's a perfect example of applying an effect to someone else. So I run up here, right? Wait for him to move. I know the context of my combat is gone, so I should probably add that in there because, we want to have things. So we've added that. But I'm not going to worry about the turns. All I'm really going to do is I'm going to cast that spell. We'll recast it, Burning Hands again. You may remember that when you cast a spell, your number memorized is decremented automatically, But the system also will allow you to cast it even if you're at 0. So it doesn't prevent you from casting. It assumes that you're smarter. Maybe you forgot to have it memorized, but you're allowed to cast it, so it will let you cast. But we'll just do that just for fun. But anyways, I've cast the spell. You can see now it's my CA of 4 times 2, so it sets up for 8 damage. Now this guy I think has fewer than 8 hit points. Yeah, he's only got 3. So I'm actually not going to apply the damage, but what I do want to do is I've selected the token, and actually here's an interesting thing. Let's say he's positioned here. Burning Hands is like a 120 degree arc. So it's not a full 180 degree arc, so I couldn't get all 3, but I've selected these 2. So now as a GM, I can go ahead and select both of those, and I can do Apply Burning. And now you can see they both picked up the burning status. They've got this little orange glowy thing on them, and you can see the effect is burning. Now the burning is not doing anything. I didn't apply any effects over here, but it does apply this burning status, and it has a duration of 1 round. I didn't even bother with the turns. Suffice to say, and my previous recommendation stands, when you set up an effect, do both of these the same. Don't leave turns blank. I think I shot myself in the foot by leaving turns blank because I was being lazy screwing around. But it's gone now. But if I now cycle through, what we're going to see is if we go through this enough here, we should see that it actually has been deleted completely. Yep, because another round has gone by. I'm not sure about the skeleton because of the way I was messing around with it. Oh no, it isn't. It has gone enough time now. So yeah, it's gone for both. So it did do that automatic cleanup 1 round after disabling it. It removed it 1 round later. So the reason I did that, by the way, is just so that if something disappears and you didn't intend for it to disappear, the GM can go back on a monster and re-enable an effect, or a player can do it on their own character as well. So that way you basically have 1 round of grace period to fix any mistakes for an effect that maybe disappeared before you wanted it to, or something like that. So that's the reason I did it that way. Okay, so anyways, you've got all this stuff with effects coming from spells. It works with weapons as well. I think I had given him a burning axe. I did. So let's have some fun here. Let's go ahead and target him, and I'm gonna do a flaming axe attack. So we're just gonna do that, and we're gonna attack. Hopefully I will hit. I rolled a critical miss. Cool. Okay, so here's the next. Actually, this is the last of the enhancements, so we're going to talk about this. So the first enhancements, if you recall, was the use button on consumable items, which is now also a use button on some other items if they have, if they have an effect on them, you can use that item to apply the effect. So that was the first enhancement. The second enhancement was a whole bunch of actor item effect stuff, primarily related around temporary effects now being timing out over time in the course of a combat, and being removed or cleaned up at the end of a combat when you actually end a combat. Also, casting a spell gives you the apply effect button, and weapons give you an apply effect button. Now, I didn't get it because I didn't hit. It actually appears in the damage box. So this is the last of the enhancements for both attack and damage rolls. If you recall, in the prior to today or prior to this release, the attack formula would simply be shown as a list of variables, 1d20 plus attack mod plus fighting FA plus strength attack mod plus mastery mod. And it would just say those words separated by plus symbols. And then you would have to look at this formula up here to figure out, oh, this +1 is the item attack mod, and this +4 is the fighting ability, and this +2 is the strength attack mod, and this +1 is the mastery mod. And you would just have to be manually sort of lining those up with your eyes, even though the attack formula down here, because it was words, it often wrapped onto a second line, and it was not visually easy to line things up. So I've changed the output to be a nice little table. It's that simple. This was something on my wish list for a couple of months, and I finally just got around to it. So now you get all your variables. You can see the number that's applied. The 1d20 is this die roll down here, so it's obvious. So now you know you've got 8 plus 1 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1. That adds up to 16. Okay. Same for damage. You know, without this, by the way, you only get this informational pop down like this if you enable debug messages. So I'll show you how to do that in a second. But essentially, damage is the same way. The damage formula elements, again, your base die roll, and then all your modifiers. Now there's some funny things, some spells do funny things. So, but essentially I've tried to handle it as gracefully as I can. Let's see if I've got an option, a spell here that might have something funny like that. Like if I look at Weird Warhammer, Weird Warhammer, it is +1 based on certain CA. So first of all, if you're using this spell, you have to manually update this 1 based on what level or CA your character is at. So you can see my CA is between 1 and 4. It's a CA of 3. So it is only +1. But when my character gets to a CA 5 through 8, I would have to manually go in and change this to a 2. And then when I do that, the attack roll formula is actually going to, it's because this is not part of a variable, it's just hard coded in here as a 1. The way it's going to show is it's going to say 1d20 plus 1, okay, as the formula element, because it's telling you that was part of the original base roll. And then you'd see this at FA would be translated as fighting ability listed in the table as a new row. So that's one thing that's kind of funny. And then another one that's a little bit, might feel a little weird, but it does make sense, is like composite longbows. If they're adjusted, you have to, if you have a custom one made, you can have it made to include your strength damage modifier in the damage. And because by default, missile weapons don't include that, you have to have that as part of your damage formula. So again, the system will properly parse that out, and it'll give you a good damage roll. In fact, I should be able to just demonstrate that one at least very easily, as long as I hit. I did hit, so that's good. So yeah, if you look at my attack roll, you can see my dex is, 0. Range modifier is included. By the way, I don't think I talked about that. Just a release from a couple of weeks ago, I added a range to target. So if I have a token targeted, it'll calculate the range automatically, and it will automatically select the range, which I can override, but it would automatically select the range appropriately. So if they're 160 feet away, it would actually bump this out to medium, etc. The other thing is you can select ammunition. When you do that, it will automatically decrease your ammunition by 1 when you make that attack. Whether you hit or not, it will decrease your ammunition by 1. So if I do that now, and I look at my arrows, they just dropped from 12 to 11, as you can see. I did a critical miss. Yeah, anyways. So yeah, you can see here, it pulls in, I was talking about the damage mod being part of the formula here. You can see it pulls in your strength damage mod correctly. And it adds in the mastery mod, which is this weapon mastery right here. This is only available for fighter classes, of course. And for pure fighters, they can have grand mastery, which is the crossed swords. But fighter subclasses can at least have regular mastery. So that's what those are for, and those are mutually exclusive. So as you can see, I can just tap it and it undoes the other one automatically. So that's what that's for. And you can see that very easily in the table here, so you know where those modifiers are coming from. Now, how do you enable these messages? You go into the settings of your game, configure settings. I'm going to go to Hyperborea 3rd edition. Debug messages. You just have to check this box. By default, it's not checked. So just check that box and you're good to go. By the way, group-based initiative is enabled by default. If you want to go to individual initiative, which I know some people homebrew and prefer to run it that way, just uncheck the box and the system will go to individual initiative where everybody has their own initiative roll. And it's going to be a D6, by the way. But by default, that is enabled. Let's see. The other thing is with initiative, reset to blank each round. That's the default option. You can also keep same or re-roll. But rules as written, this is the one you should have. This is the default. And what that does is, at the end of each round, the system wipes out your actions. So remember, if we were doing things like this, and I'm just going to pick some actions, it doesn't really matter much. We're just going to say we're doing these things. Okay, now we've got that, and I need to roll initiative. So there we go. And then as I go through the round, right? So we're going through the round. Sorry about the lag here on my screen. It's just my internet here is kind of sucky. When I get to this, it resets everybody's initiative, as you just saw. So the numbers are gone, it wipes out all the actions automatically. So you're reset for the new round, and everybody has to then declare their actions, and then you'd roll initiative and do that round. So that's the default option. And that is that. I think that's about all I had to talk about today. Read the release notes. It talks about all these things. Hopefully that'll give you enough information. There's not a ton of detail in the release notes, but at least you can look at it and think about it and kind of digest it rather than having me yammering at you with all this information. And then, of course, by all means, update your system and do some testing and play with it and see how it works, especially the effects. I know that's kind of a complex topic within Foundry, and I don't even know how many people honestly would use it. I use them. I think they're pretty handy to be able to at least tag tokens with different effects like that invisibility and some other things. And I've got some ideas about some other effects that I could do, but those are just effects. I mean, effects have to be hand rolled or custom done by each GM. But yeah, each GM has to do those effects. So, you know, your GM would have to sit down and play with those and figure out how they work in order to start applying them. But once you start getting the hang of it, it starts making sense. Then you can do some pretty nifty stuff. Like, I think, what does Carrick have? He has Gauntlets of Ogre Power. So if I look at this briefly, you can see that it's actually taking and it's overriding his strength to give him the modifiers of someone with an 18 strength, because that's the way this works. Gauntlets of Ogre Power, I didn't paste the description in here, but what they do is they give you the equivalent of 18 strength without actually bumping your strength to 18, which is kind of funny. But that's the way it's written in the book. Now, you could certainly assume that it really does move your strength to 18, but in my case, I leave the strength at its original base value, because the idea is if you take these gauntlets off, your strength is going to reduce to its original value. And so by doing this override, it sets the 18 strength modifiers, but if I remove the effect, because I take the gauntlets off, they will drop. So his strength was 15, but you can see these values have been overridden. Well, let's say, okay, I'm taking the gauntlets off. I just do that. That just temporarily removes it. But you can see now it went back to the normal modifiers for a 15 strength. And then I put the gauntlets back on. There they go. And I don't know if you could see behind there, but it was actually saying plus Gauntlets of Ogre Power over the token. There was text floating there temporarily. And now they're back to +2, +3, 5, and 40 as it would be for an 18 strength. So I have that. I think I've got something that does... Yes. So Alaric has saving throw bonuses. So he's wearing, let's see, I believe it's here. Yeah, Ring of Protection. Now, Ring of Protection, if you look at that, can I just pop it over here? Yes. You can see the description. It says it gives you, in his case, it's giving him equivalent to +1 plate mail, which is an AC2 and a DR of 2. So it's acting like armor. Okay, so first of all, if I equip the Ring of Protection, I have to unequip studded armor. I mean, I guess I don't have to. I can equip them all because the system will let me do that. However, it's only going to take the better of the two options. So my AC is not going to change just because I have equipped or unequipped studded armor. You can see his AC is 0, his DR is 2. When I unequip the studded armor, nothing changes. It's still 0 and 2, just like it was before. So, but the Ring of Protection is doing that, but it also applies... You see, I actually created it as an armor item. Weight class of unarmored, base move 40, DR2, armor class of 2. That's how a Ring of Protection works. And it also has the effect of giving you saving throw bonuses. So when I look at this, transfer effect to actor, because you want that to appear. No status condition, because if I had applied a condition, remember that would become temporary, and I don't want that. I want it to appear as a passive effect, which it does right here. But when we go to effects, here's where I'm subtracting 1, which is a bonus, from my actual saving throw values. These are my target numbers. So I'm reducing my target numbers by 1. It's not going to add 1 to the roll. It's reducing 1 from the target number. Okay, so that's how that works. So by doing that, my saving throws are 15, 13, 15, 13, 15. If I take off that ring as an example, I do that. Now this is only going to do the saving throw. It's not going to remove his AC because I would have to actually unequip it here. If I unequip it here, it also changes his AC and his DR, but it does not affect the saving throw bonuses. So just be aware, effects are completely independent of whether or not the item is equipped here. You have to do them both if you really want to unequip the item. But now you can see his saving throws went back to 16, 14. They were 15, 13. Now they're 16, 14. So if I go back here, I can reapply that. And now they're back to 15, 13. But of course, it's still unequipped here, and the AC is still 7 and DR 0. So I have to equip that there to get my AC to 0 and my damage reduction to 2. So just something to be aware of. But that's something you can do with effects. It's pretty nifty. You can do some really great stuff once you learn how it works. It is a little bit complicated, but I think it's worth the kind of effort to put in to figure it out. So, okay, I really need to tie this up. So that's all I've got to say for today. Bunch of new stuff, as well as some older features that have been added that I just hadn't done any videos about. Hopefully this will get you excited about using these new features. I'm in the Discord all the time, the Hyperborea Discord, which is Northwind Adventures, the company, the publisher. They have Northwind Adventures Discord server, and there's a Hyperborea VTT channel within that server that I'm always logged into the server in general, but I especially keep an eye on Hyperborea VTT. So if you have questions, you can pop them in there. I don't really provide support through email. If you happen to find my email address on GitHub or something, I might reply, but that's really unofficial, and I might just as easily ignore it because I don't pay a lot of attention to my email. So don't be offended, but just don't waste your time with email. Use Discord if you want to get support. That's about all I've got to say, folks. Hyperboreans, happy adventuring. This is Dave signing off.